Ani and G'day. My name is Adele Loosemore and I'm a Treaty Indian from Shebahonaning. In 2017, an independent reviewer assessed the data in the Métis Nation of Ontario's Harvester Card System. That system is built on MNO's definition of Métis ancestors and on the historic Métis communities that were created by MNO and the province of Ontario. This video is about that review. In October 2004, Ontario's Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry announced that it would recognize MNO's harvester cards for those MNO members who harvested food in areas north of Sudbury. Harvesting cards were supposed to be issued by MNO only to those members who descended from Métis root ancestors that were part of historic Métis communities. In 2018, a company called Intergroup Consultants Limited reported to MNO and the Ontario government the results of their review of MNO's harvester card system. MNO and Ontario had jointly issued instructions to Intergroup for the review of that system. That's why the final report was addressed to both MNO and the Ontario government. I'm just giving you a summary of the review. If you want to see all the details, the review is posted on MNO's website. Intergroup said they reviewed files relating to 88 family histories that included 380 Métis root ancestors and 5,600 MNO members who claimed to be descendants of Métis root ancestors. There was also a test of the harvester cardholder files to see if samples of the MNO members named in those files did have genealogical connections to one of MNO's Métis root ancestors. I'm not going to talk about that part of the review. The reviewer did not identify any problems with that test. Here's a summary of what they looked at. Is there documentary evidence that each Métis root ancestor was of mixed Indian-European ancestry, lived in a historic Métis community before a certain date, had siblings and/or descendants who were present in that community for 2 or more generations? And is there documentary evidence that the descendants of Métis root ancestors were ancestrally connected to one of MNO's Métis root ancestors? The reviewer was provided with a list of definitions for terms like documented Métis or Métis root ancestors, etc. Part of the list is shown here. At the bottom, historic Métis community is defined as those communities that are listed in more detail in Attachment A of this report. Here's part of Attachment A, showing how 3 of the historic Métis communities were described. But Intergroup was not asked to assess the definitions and concepts. Their job was to assess the paperwork, checking, for example, for any records in the file showing that Joe Blow was called a half-breed at some point, and that he lived somewhere in the geographic area that MNO and Ontario call the Killarney Historic Métis Community. Here's how they expressed the outcome of the review. "100% of the 88 Métis root ancestor packages reviewed were passed. Of these, 84 of the 88 Métis root ancestor packages reviewed were passed by Intergroup Consultants Limited, which is 95.4%, based on documentary evidence." That is not an easy sentence to understand. It was only after reading the rest of the report that the meaning of this sentence became clear to me. There were 4 families that didn't pass the review, and they're shown at the right. 2 in the Georgian Bay Historic Métis Community, and 1 each in the Northwestern Ontario and the Abitibi Inland Historic Métis communities. So Intergroup, as per the contract, submitted a preliminary report about those 4 family history packages to MNO and Ontario. It was MNO and Ontario who set out the assessment criteria that Intergroup used in their review. Nevertheless, they instructed Intergroup to treat those 4 families as verified for the purposes of the independent review. Here's a close-up view, outlined in red, of the statement in Intergroup's report. This is why Intergroup said in their summary that 88 families passed the tests, even though their company only passed 84 families. The 4 family lines that Intergroup didn't pass were passed by MNO and Ontario. And today, in October 2022, the 4 family packages that failed the review are still on MNO's website as verified Métis family lines. And I find this statement confusing. It's from a section that appears in every verified Métis family document, titled Approval by MNO Registry. It says this document and its supporting materials has been reviewed by the MNO registrar and is approved as a verified Métis family line for the historic Métis community of Georgian Bay on March 31st, 2017. The name of the historic Métis community might change, but the date is the same for the 88 family packages that were included in the independent review. They all were declared verified Métis families on March 31st, 2017, about 9 months before the independent reviewer's final report was issued. And here's another interesting thing. In one of their fact sheets, MNO said the Powley case was directly related to the purpose and results of the review. For those who don't know, the Powley case was a Supreme Court decision that set out the requirements that must be met for claiming Métis Aboriginal rights, such as harvesting. On page 1 of their fact sheet, MNO claims, the purpose of the independent evaluation, known as the independent review, was to validate that MNO harvesters card holders meet the constitutional requirements set out in Powley. From page 3, 100% of the randomly selected 328 harvesters card files reviewed were verified as meeting the criteria set out in Powley. But the reviewer's final report says something quite different about the role of the Powley decision in their assessment of MNO and Ontario's data. It is also understood in the scope of work that the independent reviewer should not provide conclusions or opinions regarding whether or not the Powley criteria have been met in the study areas.